We use compost, not chemicals. We don't vaccinate. We don't medicate. We move the animals around. They get salad bar. They have an immune system.
In this episode, I sit down with Joel Salatin, popularly known as the Lunatic Farmer. He's the owner of Polyface Farm, and author of 17 books, including Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, War Stories from the Local Food Front.
I can remember very well as a child, we never heard the phrase food allergy, celiac disease, gluten intolerance, or listeria, pfisteria, campylobacter, E. coli, salmonella. And I would suggest that that is nature's lexicon on its knees begging us, enough, please. The question is, are we willing to listen?
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Joel Salatin, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Joel, so why are egg prices so high? Give me the rundown.
Well, the egg prices are high because in the last 24 months, the U.S. has killed 166 million chickens. Most of them have been egg layers. There have been a few meat chickens and a few turkeys, but basically it's been egg layers in the last 24 months. Maybe 1 million of them have been sick. The great majority of them have not been sick. And we don't even know if they were sick and got better, or if their immune system was better and they just didn't get sick, or if they would have eventually gotten sick. We don't even ask those kind of questions because our policy is a stamp out policy. If there's one chicken in a flock, every chicken dies, even the survivors. And there's not been a single flock in the world that has had a 100% sickness rate. Even the worst flocks have only gone to 90%. So 10% have been survivors. As a person, as a farmer, and somebody who cares about whatever genetic adaptation, the worst thing you ever want to do when you have a sickness is kill the survivors. You want to breed them so that you eventually get better immunological function.
So we've done reporting on this. Obviously, I think it was on the front page of our national edition last week, and the response was, that there's a regret in doing the culling, but there just isn't a better policy. I mean, that's what we've heard. So
there are numerous alternatives surfacing. Hypochlorous is one. CDS is one. There are some homeopathic remedies, but the USDA refuses to study any of these because they're completely beholden to the pharmaceutical companies. And this whole thing has made me question just how much power do the pharmaceutical companies have when there are efficacious alternatives that can't even see the light of day. Here's the thing. Dr. Zach Bush talks about this a lot. All beings in nature, from viruses to microbes to chickens to humans, all beings in trees, all beings in nature are adapting. And so this idea of killing all the surviving birds, it deprives our chickens of being able to adapt to the virus. In other words, the virus is trying to get stronger. It's a predator, it wants to kill, let's say. And the chicken, well, it wants to survive. And so you have this tension. This is the way all things are. You have these tensions, and both of them are trying to adapt. If we kill the surviving chickens, we've now deprived our poultry from their genetic adaptivity to the virus. And so all we hear all the time from the industry is, well, the virus is mutating. Oh, it's a mutating virus. Well, chickens mutate too. So allowing nature to adapt and be malleable like it is, to me, makes a lot more sense in letting the dynamic order and the spontaneity of adaptation of living beings to express itself.
Tell me more about your farm, and clearly there must be some pigs on the farm as well, given your tie.
There are. We have pigs. So our farm is in Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, and we're in pastured livestock. So what that means is, rather than being in a confinement house, our animals are on pasture. So we have grass-finished beef, we have pigurator pork. That means they're able to aerate and do things. We have pastured chickens, lamb, rabbit, duck, and turkey. And everything is on pasture and moves, daily or almost daily from, pasture to pasture. And this keeps them sanitary. It lets them eat green material, some salad, and gives them a clean new place to lounge. So they get their bedding changed every day. And it's completely different than a confinement, what we call a confinement factory house, where the animals don't get fresh air, they don't get sunshine, and they're confined in a psychologically stressful, emotional, deprived situation. And they never get green material. They never get grass. And chicken never gets bugs. A chicken can't scratch.
Why do they call you a lunatic?
Well, I took on that mantra years and years ago because I was getting so much heat from the conventional agriculture system. We use compost, not chemicals. We don't vaccinate. We don't medicate. We move the animals around. They get salad bar. They have an immune system. And so I was getting so much heat from the conventional system. I mean, I was called a bioterrorist. I've been called Typhoid Mary, a starvation advocate, because we all know that if we quit using chemicals, we'd all, half of us would die. There wouldn't be enough food. And so after one particularly aggressive phone call, I hung up. I remember I was sitting there and I said, well, I can either be depressed and frustrated about this, or, hey, let's have fun with it. Let's embrace it. Sure, I'm a lunatic. Let's have fun with it. And I just grabbed that mantra, and it stuck. And now I realize that was a stroke of genius, because if you Google lunatic farmer, there is not another lunatic farmer on the planet. It's pretty cool to come up with a moniker that nobody else uses and nobody else has ever come up with. So so I have fun with it. Of course I'm a lunatic, and it allows you to enjoy the tension rather than feel angry, vengeful, or upset about it.
So one of our staff is a big fan of the Jeremy Clarkson show. Mm-hmm. And she mentioned to me actually that she, he's been inspired by you apparently. And just to tell me a bit about your relationship.
Well, I've been at this a long time, and I'm just grateful and blown away by the number of people I run into now around the world who have read I've written 16 books. Number 17 is coming out this year. And I've been doing this a long time. I mean, my first little pastured poultry manual came out in 1991. It's hard to believe that it's been way over 30 years since that first manual came out on how to have a small-scale, profitable pastured meat chicken enterprise, broilers. I travel the world and speak at conferences, so I know that my writing and my columns and my speaking have gone far beyond what I could imagine, and I'm just thrilled. I have just so many testimonial letters. I was able to quit my town job and come back to the farm full time thanks to your teaching, your models, and that's really gratifying.
And Joel, we're going to take a quick break, and folks, we're going to be right back. And we're back with the lunatic farmer, Joel Salatin. Tell me a little bit about regenerative agriculture, because apparently Jeremy Clarkson has actually started regenerative on his farm now as well.
Yeah. So I've been in this space long enough to have watched the natural farming, sustainable farming, organic farming. Now it's regenerative farming. So about every 10 years, the old buzzword wears out, and there's got to be a new one. So again, I get to be the lunatic. So when people say, "What kind of farming do you do?" I like to kind of rattle the cage and say, "Profitable." Well, that's a new concept, profitable farming. So without any government subsidies, by the way, and so I have fun with it. But the basic concept is that you're studying creation's pattern and order and trying to duplicate that on a domestic scale. So I'll just give you an example. So on our farm, we're asking, well, what do we notice when we look at animals in nature? Well, they move. They're not confined in houses, in little cubicles with their tails cut off and their, and all this. No. They actually move. So just the idea of moving animals, that choreography, if you will. I mean, think about the Serengeti. What you see is movement. The animals aren't sedentary. That's one of the things that separates them from plants. They move around, and so as soon as you say, well, animals move, oh, well, okay, now we need to be able to provide shelter for them that's portable. We need to provide water to them that's portable, feed that's portable, and control. Because Starbucks doesn't want our cows down on their parking lot. Okay, so we got to keep them home, and so you have these things that are a natural outgrowth of a simple phrase, animals move. And so our farm's creativity and innovations that we've done, from egg mobiles and gobbledygos and egg and all the things that we've done, have not come because we sat around in a room and had a focus group on how can we be different. Rather it comes from a very strategic understanding. Animals move. Okay, so how do we duplicate that migratory, that movement choreography, and what are the symbiotic relationships? For example, in nature, the wildebeest or the Cape buffalo don't get grubicides and parasiticides. Well, how do they stay healthy? Birds follow them. Birds, the egret on the rhino's nose, they pick out the little bugs and things, and they scratch through the dung and spread that out so the sun can solarize it and it covers more ground. And so we follow our cow herd with egg mobiles, portable chicken houses. The chickens then scratch through the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, disinfect it for the cows the next time they come through, and you have this very natural cycle. So while the average farm is shooting their cows up with grubicides and parasiticides, we simply collect thousands of dollars worth of eggs as a byproduct of our pasture sanitation program. And so that's the way we duplicate these systems.
I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a couple more. Let's take the cow. I mean, cows are herbivores, but you got to realize that for 20 years maybe, our agriculture experts took farmers like me to free steak dinners to teach us this new way of growing cows, where we grind up dead cows and we cook it, and then we feed that back to our cows in their feedlots. And I looked at this, and as well as other people that think like I do, and we looked around and we said, well, where on the planet do herbivores eat carrion? They don't. They're herbivores. They're plant eaters. They don't eat meat. And so our farm, as well as others like us, didn't buy into that narrative, while the rest of the world did. And 30 years after that, we had bovine spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow. I didn't know that mad cow would happen, in 30 years. But I knew that this was chaos. It was not ordered. It did not comport with any pattern that you could see in nature. And so for me, that was enough. But we have this Jurassic Park mentality in our agriculture elite circles. If you remember the movie Jurassic Park, and the scientist is euphoric over what he's created with these dinosaurs, and they're eating cars and people, mayhem and destroying the planet. And the journalist, who's of course the alter ego in the movie, gets in the face of the scientist and says, "But sir, just because we can, should we?" That's a pregnant question, and that should be asked at every technological advance that we make, because we're really smart we're made in the image of God. We've got these big brains, okay? And my dad used to say, we're so smart, we can overrun our headlights. In other words, we can invent things that we can't spiritually, emotionally, or physically metabolize. We invent this thing, and then we spend 2 generations trying to figure out how to handle, what we invented. The DDT, the monosodium glutamate, the hydrogenated vegetable oil. It would behoove us to come at this gently, and not like a bunch of swashbuckling, conquistadors walking into sacred ground. I mean, we've only cataloged and named 10% of the microorganisms in soil. Think about that. Only 10%. 90%, we don't know what they do. We don't know their name. We don't know their function. And yet we come to the soil and said, hey, we'll just put some intravenous synthetic nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and voila, we'll have food. And suddenly our food is, a quarter as nutritious as it was 100 years ago. Our broccoli's less nutritious, our carrots less nutritious, and we confine these animals in these factory houses, and suddenly we have this new lexicon. I mean, I can remember very well as a child, we never heard the phrase food allergy. We never heard the phrase, celiac disease, or gluten intolerance, or listeria, pfisteria, campylobacter, E. coli, salmonella. We never heard those words. And I would suggest that lexicon, that new lexicon, is nature's lexicon on its knees, begging us, enough, please. You've disrespected, if you've abused us enough. And the question is, are we willing to listen to nature's voice?
Not only are you into, I guess, changing things in terms of how farming is done, but in terms of how people deal with food, just that very idea. I mean, you're, the author of the Food Emancipation Proclamation, or you're the primary evangelist. Tell me about this. What does that even mean?
Since the Food Safety Inspection Service was put in by Teddy Roosevelt in 1908, after 1906's Upton Sinclair book, The Jungle, which exposed the abuses in the Chicago butchering slaughterhouses. Since we've had the FSIS, there's been an incremental move by government regulatory agents to criminalize and prohibit direct neighbor-to-neighbor food commerce. All right? So let me give you an example. So we have a lady in our church. We all call her Aunt Grace. We love this lady. She's got a big garden, some chickens, and she loves cooking. So we want to go to Aunt Grace to say, would you cook a couple of these pot pies that we love so dearly? We'll pay you $20 or whatever you say a piece. No, that's illegal. It's illegal for her to make a pot pie for us to feed our guests. Now, that's wrong. We should be able to engage in a freedom of choice as consenting adults transaction with Aunt Grace without a government agent in between that. Now, I'm not suggesting that she should be free to, sell them to Sri Lanka or put them in Walmart or Costco, okay? But I am suggesting that neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, we should be able to engage in a consensual, and I'm using powerful words because it's important to understand in our country right now, we love freedom of choice. We have choice in the bathroom, choice in the bedroom, choice in the womb, but no choice in the kitchen. And people say, well, I go to Walmart, look at all the choice I have. Yeah, but that's a very narrow funnel. All that food comes through an industrial funnel with a bureaucrat oversight that doesn't allow for the kind of localized, customized, non-MSG ingredients. And so the idea of a Food Emancipation Proclamation to be able to unfetter, unshackle, and de-enslave our food system to this federal bureaucratic regulatory intervention so that you and I can engage in a transaction voluntarily to choose our fuel for our microbiome. I think that the very notion that Aunt Grace is less trustworthy than a federal government agency creates a philosophical situation in your head that people that I have a relationship with and local business people somehow are less trustworthy than a nameless, faceless Washington bureaucrat. I just don't think that makes sense philosophically. Transparency wins opaqueness. It beats opaqueness every day. And not only that, but risk is subjective. I mean, I think people subject themselves to risk every day. I mean, drinking Coca-Cola, that's risky behavior. But you can drink, it's perfectly fine to feed your child, 4 cans of Coca-Cola a day, but 1 teaspoon of raw milk, that might kill them. And so how we develop a culture in which we exercise decision-making muscles. See, I think discernment is like a muscle. Discernment. How do we get people to be wise, to make discerning decisions? Well, we give them the opportunity to make a decision and then live through the consequences of that decision. That's how we develop discernment muscles. And what's happened is, since every morsel of food has to have a government stamp on it, we have reduced nutritional discernment in the culture to a new nadir of ignorance, because, government says it's okay, it must be fine. So I don't have to think about this anymore. We send our kid to school, I don't have to think about my kid's education, they're in school, that's just fine. And then suddenly, COVID comes and the kids are home and we're looking over their shoulders saying, what? They're teaching that in school? And we have a Northern Virginia revolt, that happened in 2020 in the last gubernatorial election. And so giving people decision-making capacity by allowing the lunatic fringe freedom to bring creativity and innovation to the culture is the very foundation of how you punch through status quo problems. Status quo problems never get solved from the status quo, from the top down. They always come percolating from the bottom up, from people whose livelihoods and relationships and equity are not tied in to keeping the mothership, to keeping the status quo in place. That's how true innovation happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joel Salatin, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you. It's been a delight to be here.
Thank you all for joining Joel Salatin and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellek.